So, who are investors? Generally speaking, and we've seen this previously, let's turn on the laser pointer. Feels fancy. So investors are individuals. They can even be organizations and they can even be large companies. And they invest capital. Now, when I say capital, capital is a term used in finance and it generally refers to something which holds value. So that can be cash, that can be even assets such as shares of a business. But generally speaking, investors are companies, organizations, or people like you and I who invest capital in order to make a profit, right? So capital, is, just as a reminder, is a broad term used across finance and refers to any entity which holds value. So that can just be cash or money, like the £10 in our bank, or even financial assets like the share of a company. And we want to make a profit, right? So we want to get more than we put in. So that is what an investor is. Now, there are different markets and there are different types of investors, okay? And I'm not going to go into each market in extreme detail, I just want to generally overview them, okay? So there are several types of markets you can invest in. You can invest in real estate, commodities, currency. Don't know why real estate is on there twice. Derivatives, bonds, stocks, etc. Now, some of these you're probably looking at and going, I have no idea what these are, but that's completely fine. That's not expected. And I'm assuming you've probably heard of stocks, real estate, and currency. Derivatives and bonds are the lesser known ones. Even if you haven't heard of stocks, currency, or real estate, that's okay. We will look at each one of these in further detail in later videos. But you can see there are lots of markets you can invest in, right? Now, investors can do other things. They can provide loans. If you've ever watched A Christmas Carol, then Ebenezer Scrooge, who's that guy, the main character, he's basically an investor. He provides loans, and then he expects those loans to be paid back with a given interest so that you'd be benefited, right? So you've made money on the money you gave. You're basically paying someone to have money, right? And banks also do this. Banks are a form of investors, as you'll see further on as well. Investors can also buy shares, and you've probably heard about this, the stock market buying shares, but we will look at it in further detail. And investors may also guarantee to pay creditors. Now, this is where it gets a bit confusing, but to understand this, we first want to understand who a creditor is. A creditor is an individual or a firm which lends money to a debtor. I apologize, that's my younger brother, you can hear him. So a creditor is someone who lends money to someone else, and it does this, and then it makes money through interest income and other credit fees. Or an investor may contribute with labour. Now, these last two ones, so the creditor one and the labour one, you're probably a bit confused about, and that's fine because the last two ones, they're known as debt financing, and contributing with labour is also quite an in-depth topic, and these are fields we will look into later. I don't want to go into too much time explaining them, but they are ways you can invest. And what I want to get across to you guys is that there are so many ways you can invest and so many markets you can invest in. So that's that. What does this cover? So investors may operate both in primary and secondary markets. So the primary market is where you inject capital directly into a business, so you invest your money to have a share in the business, or you buy stocks from other investors. And the second method is also quite interesting because you see how the stock prices vary, and you can, based on that knowledge, get stocks from other investors. You can do options with other investors. Options is something which we'll look into as well. It gets very, very interesting as you go further in depth, and I promise you we will go further in depth. So what an investor might do is they might make a commitment. So when I say a commitment, they might invest some capital in exchange for a stake in the business or a fixed return, so a dividend or an interest. Or what they might do instead is they might sell their investment on for a higher price. So if stock markets rise, let's say if you've got a share in a business, and if stock markets rise, that investment, that share that you've got, will sell for a higher price, and you as an investor can make more money. I hope that made sense, but we will look into this in more detail. Another thing to note, when two companies commit to a joint venture and they contribute funds to it, they are both investors. So for example, I don't know if you heard, and I don't know if this applies myself, but when Sainsbury's and Argos combined together, that was a joint venture. They were both investors, they both contributed funds to it. Finally, many people get together and form investment clubs. So this is where you distribute your knowledge and resources as a group to get more successful investment outputs. So now there are two types of investors, and I will cover these in the next video because we are running short on time. In fact, you know what, I'll do one of them. So the first type is retail investors. Now a retail investor is someone who invests for their own personal benefit. Like you and I, we might invest a bit of cash in the bank, we might invest a bit of our money in the stock market. We are retail investors. We are doing this for our own personal profit. And there's angel investors who invest in their own startup companies. These are another type of retail investors. Okay, so retail investors invest for their own personal account rather than for a company or an organization. And they also include collectors of items of value, such as antiques, stamps, coins, and art. I don't know if you ever watched that show. I don't know what it's called, but it shows people who've collected all these purses or all these cars and are now trying to sell them for a higher price. Those are also retail investors. Angel investors, as we've talked about. Now the other types are institutional investors, and they've got their own slides because they've got a lot going on. So we'll look at them in the next video.